disclaimer that Fusaka is already kind of full, right? So as I described in my introduction here, we are trying to do more frequent, smaller releases, and these two things are already quite big. So obviously no promises about squeezing additional things in. But at the very worst, this is a trial run before we start planning out Glamsterdam, and we get in the habit of reaching out to other communities and getting their opinions. So I guess my first question for the group is, did you take a look at this, and were any of these kind of springing to mind as particularly juicy for the projects that you're working on? And would you like me to talk about anything in particular, or do you want me to just grind through the list here and give you some details as to what they all mean?
I think for me, to be honest, I generally don't keep up to date on the specifics of the various forks and EIPs. I generally kind of learn about them after the fact or right before, just because of the amount of things that there are to keep up with.
Sure.
But so I think for me, I would definitely need a high level, quick summary of things that are happening. Is there when you guys do these hard forks, from my understanding, there isn't necessarily a theme to them per se, but they're just kind of like a conglomeration of various things that come together. But I don't know.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. There was some sentiment in prior hard forks that we'd get to a world where every hard fork had a primary and a passenger, like a driver and a passenger. If you think that it's a car going down the road, right? And so there would be one big thing, and this was the thing that should dominate the mind share, and then it could bring along something else that was a little bit smaller. Pectra didn't go that way. Pectra has so much stuff crammed into it that it's kind of hard to make the argument. I think maybe you might say account abstraction was the driver, but there's just a ton of stuff in there. This one, it looks like kind of PeerDOS and EOF are jockeying for who's going to be the driver. One of them, PeerDOS, is going to unlock a lot more scaling, and EOF is going to unlock a lot more tooling and compiler advantages and developer experience improvements, right? So to answer your question, we would love to have thematic hard forks, but the nature of it is the coordination overhead is so expensive that it really is just a matter of when can we get something out and what things will fit in that bucket. All right. Any other questions?
Makes sense. I think it would be helpful as well for me, just if to contextualize this also, what is expected to come out in Pectra as well, just like a quick summary of it, the highlights. Okay. And then see how then we go into this with that context and how they build upon each other, maybe, if they do. Complement.
Actually, we can do this. Meta heap for Pectra. So this is the same document, but for the current release that we're working on. All right. Here, I'll also throw that in the chat for the friends following along at home. So a number of things here. This one here, when I was talking about account abstraction, that's this guy here. So that's the big one. But there's a whole bunch of other things that are being included. So taking it from the top here, we have new precompiles for the BLS curve operations. All right, so now when you write a contract, you can get access to elliptic curve, specifically BLS type aggregations between signatures. So the same technology that the consensus layer uses to make sure that everybody has voted on a slot for being the right slot will now be available in the EVM itself. Saving historical block hashes in state, you can now write a contract that can look up what the prior block hash was to the one that you're on, going back 8K worth, I think. There's a ring buffer structure in there, and those will be available to smart contracts. Supply validator deposits on chain. The old way of doing this was you had to listen to the logs being emitted from the validator, from the deposit contract to detect new validators. Now that's being explicitly included in the blockchain. Execution layer triggerable exits. If you wanted to exit your validator, you have to have control of it, and you have to do some stuff through the consensus layer to exit your validator. We can now do this from the execution layer instead. So this is a thing that people probably will very rarely need, but staking providers are interested in it. Same with increasing the max effective balance. This is another thing for staking operators. So instead of having 32 ETH, and then as you accumulate rewards, withdrawals keep going out, you can accumulate them much higher than that. And you can consolidate your validators now. So if you have a high balance that you're actually staking, higher than 32, you don't need to spin up a separate validator for each of one. You can just consolidate all of that stake under one validator, and you have a much easier time of managing your keys and all that fun stuff. So this is another gimme for the staking operations. Moving committee index outside of attestation, that's a consensus layer thing. I don't really know too much about that one. Increasing the call data cost. This is a thing that we're doing to encourage L2s to use blobs more than call data. General purpose execution requests. This is a convenience thing for developers. So instead of updating the block structure every time we introduce something like withdrawals or deposits or consolidations, we have a general purpose mechanic that can be extended every time we need to add something instead of modifying the block structure. So this is kind of a design improvement. Blob throughput increases. We're getting more blobs. Right now, the target is 3 and the max is 6 blobs per slot. And we want to increase that to 6 as a target and 9 as a max. This is account abstraction, and this is another convenience thing that's going in there to configure and control the blob targets. So, boom, now you know everything that's going to be in Pectra.
Thank you. That was helpful.
So, you know, you got a similar type situation here for Fusaka. The next one coming up here, right? Pure DOS. Big scaling unlock. Big scaling unlock. This is a very consensus layer specific thing, so don't ask me too many questions on it. But if you do have questions on it, I can put you in touch with the right people. The TLDR is that instead of blobs having to be available to all of the different clients, they can now sample a subset of it and then cryptographically prove that something is extremely likely to be available without being 100% sure. And that will allow, you know, almost a 10x increase in blob throughput across the board. So this is a big thing for anybody that's using blobs, mostly L2s. And then EOF. EOF is adjusting, well, I shouldn't say it's adjusting. It's the next generation of how we want to structure smart contract code. Right now, there's no real structure to smart contract code. And this is introducing a container format that allows us to be a lot more structured about it and to include all kinds of different features that compiler teams will be interested in. Okay, so for instance, you can now have static relative jumps instead of dynamic relative jumps, which means that you can exhaustively trace out a contract for where it's going to go. You can have reusable functions in your contract. They're defined at the bytecode level, so you don't have to actually repeat that bytecode elsewhere. You can validate your stack, how you're using your stack, so you don't run into stack overflow type issues as a surprise. So there's a whole bunch of these things here. I probably don't need to get into too much detail on them. But it is a significant quality of life improvement for anybody writing smart contracts. And all of these new features will eventually find their way into the compilers and will be expressed as cool new things that you can do through Solidity or Viper, whatever your smart contract language of choice is. So that's what we're trying to commit to for Fusaka. But the real interesting bit is down here, right? Considered for inclusion and proposed for inclusion, okay? So from the top here, this one, you see this one's called RIP 7212? That is a roll-up improvement proposal as opposed to an Ethereum improvement proposal. This is a new mechanic that roll-ups have to weigh in on the development process for Ethereum. This is introducing a new elliptic curve for us to do signatures against. The R1 curve is very widely supported in hardware encryption modules. So for instance, if you are an iPhone user and you have that secure enclave in your unit, you could sign things with it based on this curve, and then the signature could be validated in the EVM. So it's been out there for a while. Most of the teams have implementations of it. It's just kind of a matter of committing to it, making it available, and releasing it. Down here, propose for inclusion. Let me stop for a second there and take a drink and let you all weigh in if you have any questions. I'm going to, boy, this is a big list. I'm going to skip to the ones that I like. Let's do that. That would be fun. So I think the two in here that I'm most excited about is 7793 and 7843. These add new precompiles to the EVM that will allow the smart contract to get the index of a transaction within a block and the current slot number. Okay. The reason we care about those is my current passion in Ethereum is encrypted mempools and sealed transactions. All right, so these are areas of research that will one day mitigate MEV. And there's nothing I like more than putting rent-seeking middlemen out of business. And so what these are going to allow us to do is they're going to allow people to start experimenting with smart contracts that can implement different types of sealed transaction mechanics. So if you come up with a scheme where, say, you have a commit reveal scheme with your transactions, and you want to say, okay, well, if everybody publishes the hash of their transaction before they publish it, I can write a smart contract that looks at the order that they're in, and then makes sure another block that comes in keeps those transactions in that same order. I'm glossing over this quite a bit, but the idea is that if you can make the EVM a little more self-aware of the transaction that it's running, where it appeared in the block, and what the block's position in the overall chain is, you might be able to develop these new types of methods of mitigating transactions being executed out of order, which is what we think of as MEV. Does everybody know what I mean when I say MEV? I probably should have not buried the lead there.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. MEV sucks, but it's a really, really hard problem to weigh in on, right? And it would honestly be kind of wild if we actually could solve that. Like if you could build a system that prevented middlemen from extracting rent, like that would be kind of wild. So anyway, that's one of the things that I think is important that I would like to include. And it's the same thing for getting the transaction blocker, including the slot number there. And those would be fairly cheap to implement. I don't think it would be really all that hard for teams to implement those. Okay, other things that I think are cool and maybe you'll think are cool.
For maybe just for those two, then is it that like you can now by being able to reference those bots, is that something that only, excuse my ignorance, but I assume this is something that will only be possible for transactions after the hard fork?
Yes, that is true. Yes.
Right.
These would be new
But
features
like,
that would be introduced. So yeah, after this hard fork were to happen, if we were to add these capabilities, you could only take advantage of them after that point. Yeah.
and so the idea is that like by being able to track those specific places, you're given kind of like more, I don't know how to verbalize this. Like you can more easily pinpoint specific information about a transaction that can be useful inputs for like more complex forms of like mixing up that information for kind of or
I
not
think
or not
I
not
think more
mixing up,
like
but
reasoning about it, not so much about
yeah.
mixing up about it, but it's like when a transaction arrives to your smart contract, you could also draw a little picture of like, how is the block that this arrived in laid out?
Hmm.
Like let's
So
say you said, I don't know, let's come up with a totally naive implementation. Okay, if user X front runs my transaction, okay, I got a beef with user X, right? I hate that guy. Um, I write a smart track transaction that in my token or whatever, my token contract that says like, hey, if he's trying to buy anything before me, that's not going to work. We're not going to accept his money. We're going to just give him a refund if he tries to buy something before me in a block. Like you could write something that would do that. I think that's being a jerk, but whatever. The point is that we give them the tools to actually reason a little bit more about where the transactions that are hitting the contracts occur. Did that answer your question or clarify things at all?
yeah, so basically it can be good. I do something as nice, like silly as like I don't know, only passes transaction if it's like the third one in the block or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Um, cool. Any other questions? Then some of the other things that are included in here, right down here at the bottom, we have a bunch of things that are EOF upgrades. Okay, so these are things that we're leaving out of the initial EOF design because they're not strictly necessary, but they would be cool to have. All right. Oh, here's one that you might be interested in, a pay opcode. Okay, so it's a new opcode that actually just pays somebody in the middle of a transaction. This is actually kind of a pain in the butt right now. If you've ever tried to like move money within your smart contract, you have to like delegate out. You have to create another transaction and call that out and run it. And um, there's a couple of things that can go wrong when you do that. It's not the cleanest and safest experience. So somebody noticed this and they were like, why don't we just have a pay opcode? And that's what this is. This would introduce a pay opcode. So the same way that you have like a special type of transaction to actually execute a payment that is different from a smart contract, now you can do that same operation from within your smart contract without any of these weird workarounds that are kind of outlined here.
Is that the equivalent of basically just like a transfer?
Yep. Cost like a fixed amount of gas.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy that we didn't have this like in the beginning.
Yep. All right. So that's cool. A lot of these other things are like, okay, transaction gas limit cap. Sure. I don't know. I don't really have strong feelings about this one. This would prevent you from being able to fill up a block with a single transaction. So there will always be more than one transaction. This number here is probably old, right? But you could set this number to whatever. But the spirit of this is it keeps you from being able to monopolize a particular block.
I'm not. Yeah. Sorry if this is a dumb question, but
Nope.
Is there a maximum amount of gas in a block?
Yes, there is. Today it is 36 million. That is a fun question, actually, not a dumb question. It is a fun question because that is user configurable. So if you're running a proposer and you are pushing out blocks, you can configure what you think the maximum amount of gas in there should be. We currently are setting a maximum of, it used to be 30, and there were recent communications that went out and told people like, hey, it's okay to turn it up to 36. We think that's fine. I fully expect us to go up to 60, probably in Fusaka, or sometime before, sometime around there. Along the path to Fusaka, I could see us jumping up to 60. And what that means is then when people propose blocks, there will be a target that's half of the maximum. And so you're trying to build a block that is at that point to maintain equilibrium. When you go over that equilibrium point, the pricing mechanisms change, right? So if you remember EIP 1559, the way the gas price changed. So when we're over our target, gas prices go up, right? The burn rate accelerates, Ethereum goes deflationary, and you're allowed to go up to that whatever configured maximum is. Okay, so today it's 36, in the future it'll be 60 million, and so that's the context which this EIP lives in. What else we got here? Mod EXP gas cost increase. Some of these are things that are upper bound for mod EXP. Yeah, these two are kind of interest to people that are building ZK rollups. I don't know that we need to really get into that. Oh, this one's awesome. Fork choice enforced inclusion lists. This one's kind of complicated, so it's kind of a long shot that it gets in, frankly. And it's also kind of in the category of maybe not ready yet from a research perspective. But the idea is that if I am running my validator and I think I'm detecting transaction censorship, I can tell the rest of the network that, hey, this transaction hash I think is being censored. Somebody needs to include it. So that's kind of the TLDR. And so the idea is that, you know, each client can build their own heuristics for detecting what they think is censorship. So for instance, I see a transaction that has been priced competitively with the rest of the stuff that's in the mempool, and it's just been sitting there for like dozens of blocks. I could flag it as, I think this is being censored. I include it in what we're calling an inclusion list when I propose my block. And then whoever gets in next looks at it and they have to build their block, and they see that everybody agreed on my block. And if you're building on top of it and you agreed on my block and you see that there's an inclusion list on it, you need to now pull those allegedly censored transactions into your block. So, you know, MEV is a huge problem, right? There's only 2 MEV builders in the market. It's totally, it's a duopoly. And you can't actually tell what's being censored and what's not being censored because you can't really see into that private mempool. So this gives us a tool to help chip away at that. Okay.
I'm not sure if I understand it, but yeah, it gets the wheels turning.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. And you know, the rest of these are kind of a little inside baseball, frankly. There are a lot of pricing tunings. block level warming, I mean, that's mildly interesting. So today there is a mechanic where when you send a transaction, you can say, hey, this transaction is going to access storage in these particular places. And you warm it up, right? So it's basically you're saying, I'm going to pay the cost to load it from disk and have it in memory because I'm going to be using it a bunch throughout this transaction. EIP 7863, which I have up on the screen here, allows everybody in the block to reap the benefits of that, right? So whoever wrote this, I don't know if it was Tony or, yeah, here's the authors here. But the point is that they discovered like, hey, there's actually like an optimization there where maybe I want to be further back in the block if I'm going to be using the same storage that people earlier in the block are, right? So this idea is that whoever gets there first warms it up for everybody else in the block. So that's nice. It's sharing. But yeah, look at that, 5%. So that'll save people some gas. And yeah, I think that's probably about the long and short of the interesting bits here. I know that was a big information dump. I appreciate y'all for hearing it out, listening to it. We got about 25 minutes left. I'm happy to answer questions. Stick around. I can answer questions about Fusaka or whatever. So the floor is yours. I'm pretty much done.
I might be just a tad out of the loop, but I know there was an array of account abstraction EIPs that were like in the pipeline. I assume like those are going out before this hard fork.
Yeah, these are going out in the current Pectra hard fork. Yes.
I see.
And what I was presenting just there was the one after that. So these should be out this first half of the year. Yeah. If you want to learn more about those, you want to look into EIP 7702 and take a look and see what folks are doing. I know folks at MetaMask are very interested in this. They're working on it. I don't know who else has got cool ideas, but this is supposed to be a pretty big user experience unlock in a lot of different ways. So,
Thanks.
Sure.
I'm curious to hear from like other devs, like I don't know, maybe Bagelface, if you had any thoughts about like some of these EIPs, if there's anything like for you that are particularly interesting in work that you've been doing, or if there's any relation to any bread chain stuff you've been doing.
Most of it would not be directly, I guess. Yeah. The ERF one is like back end, really back end stuff.
Hmm. Did you have any thoughts, Bagel, or? It's on mute.
No, not really. I came in a little bit late, so I missed like the intro in the context of this. But it's always nice to have somebody knowledgeable go through them, like all of these individual EIPs, and kind of explain them in straightforward layman's terms. So I appreciate you doing it.
Happy to help. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah, the implications that we have EIPs are the thing that's usually hard to grasp. What does the very like low level technical change, like what do they actually mean for the like ecosystem, L2s, user experience, and yada yada. So it's that's quite nice.
Great.
Do you
It's-
have any?
it's very-
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Bagel.
Oh, I was going to ask a separate question. So if you just wanted to finish that thought, I'll ask afterwards.
Sure. So I was just going to say that, now is the time where client teams are preparing position papers on what they think should be in the next hard fork. I know that the Reth team has already published their paper. It's floating around out there. Besu has their position, and I've been holding on it until I was able to have conversations with a broader audience. So when I was at ETH Denver, I was kind of working the floor and talking to people. That was very much not successful. Trying to ask them like, okay, what do you want in Fusaka? What do you want in Fusaka? But there were side conversations that I had later on that were successful. So that's kind of what this is. You should expect to see a paper in the next 1 to 2 weeks from Besu that says, hey, here's what we think should be in Fusaka. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, my question is with 7702, do you have like any concerns for like an end user, like I guess like the fallout of that being that, if I understand it correctly, previously, in order to, how would I put this? Because it's not exactly true that like, a signature is presented in one way that people are used to seeing. And then, with the upgrade to a smart contract wallet, people will start kind of, I guess maybe like signing signatures that would otherwise like normally be considered like benign, like signing into like a, you know, a, a website or something like that, like to verify like you own the address, and then relaying that through these smart contract wallets and like, executing malicious stuff on people's behalf, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So that was very much probably the dominant form of conversation when we were building this, honestly. And the answer always comes down to like, well, yeah, you have to trust who you're sending it to, right? Which is not a great answer. And I think that I would imagine that as 7702 smart wallets start rolling out, there will be a lot of hesitation to adopt them because you almost have a trust bootstrapping problem, right? Like you're kind of nobody wants to be the early adopter on something like this. So I would imagine there being a ton of people that are more advanced users, people that have really good address and wallet hygiene, funding things in very limited ways with amounts of money that they're willing to lose, and then playing with the wallets and seeing whether or not the UX actually is improved enough for them to take bigger bets on it. And while that's going on, I would hope that there is a social component that grows and says, okay, this account abstraction wallet is pretty good. It's pretty safe. Maybe it's open source. Here's how to vet it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm right there with you. The whole notion of auth and auth call was frankly terrifying to me. And there is a revocation mechanism in it. And that was debated for a long time to try and figure out whether or not that was necessary, how it was going to work, and how it should be implemented. There was a lot of discussion on, should your authentication, right? Should you're signing this and authorizing somebody to do a thing? Should that be portable across networks? Should that go across different chains? And some people are like, well, no, that's crazy. And other people are like, well, no, you have to do that. That's the only way that we're going to deal with chain fragmentation in a roll-up centric roadmap. And they're both kind of right, So there's a lot to sort of sit back and watch and learn about account abstraction.
Yeah, it makes sense. So it's like a sensible thing if you're not like super, technical and really, really understanding like the implications of what you're doing, and you kind of just like sit back and let other people kind of take the arrows for you before you run out there yourself.
I think so. That's how I'll be doing it.
Yeah.
I guess most people would task their own wallet like MetaMask to do the bundling thing and other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you already trust. If anybody's using a non-open source wallet, they're already trusting um, the developers. If you are using an open source wallet like MetaMask, you're trusting the developers and the peer reviews and all the eyes that are on it. So all of these things have a trust profile. As much as we want to build the trustless, permissionless future, it is an inevitability that we continue to have to manage.
Yeah. I think the experimentation on 7702 is like really hard to. The dev would be trying, but like the adaptation outside of like major mob like MetaMask is like really huge ass, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah, but it had to be here. I think we waited long enough to do simple stuff like multi-core.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we can put a pin in it here. I hope that was informative. I hope that was useful. Again, my mission here is to get a broader audience engaged with what is going on in the Ethereum community instead of kind of having the same, the same influences and the same voices all the time. So if you know of other communities that I should be reaching out to, I'm open to having that discussion as well. Just level set that, hey, Fusaka might actually be full, but it doesn't hurt to get into the habit of coordinating prior to a hard fork.
I had maybe one question on proposer builder separation, which I assume
Yeah.
you might have some thoughts on, because as far as I understand, that's kind of like the proposed way of mitigating MEV the most, I guess.
Well,
if I understand correctly, maybe not.
yeah, you're not. So I understood it that way as well when it was initially designed and built. Unfortunately, the design has evolved over time where it no longer claims to do that.
Is that claim based on like them researching more and being like, oh, it actually doesn't solve the problem, or adjusting it to where MEV is still there because they don't think it's a problem?
I think it's the former. I think this was a further exploration of the design. And what they did realize is that there is a critical thing that proposer builder separation that will give you that you will eventually need to mitigate MEV, and that's delayed execution. Delayed validation is what they call it here. And so, when you separate the building and the proposing, you're allowed to do this delayed validation, and that is a necessary foundation for doing things like sealed transactions and encrypted mempools. There's probably 4 or 5 encrypted mempool or sealed transaction designs floating around out there, that all of which will mitigate MEV, and they all rely on some form of proposer builder separation and being able to delay validation. So yeah, I was all about EPBS when it first dropped, because we all thought that was really going to be the silver bullet for MEV, and unfortunately, it's not quite sufficient. The sealed transaction strategies that I've seen right before don't require it. However, we're not sure they work yet. They're still very much being researched. The encrypted mempool things, we're more confident that they will work, but we're also more confident that they'll be more difficult and they'll tax the network more. They'll introduce multi-party computation in order to share keys to decrypt transactions in the mempool. And all that gets bolted on top of ePBS already. So, yeah, I had the same perspective that you did at first, and then my heart broke a little
Yeah.
bit when we discovered that that
Damn.
wasn't the case. But we haven't given up the fight.
Is there like a position of the EF to mitigate MEV? Or ask
I
for
don't work for
developers?
the EF, and I
Right,
can't
right.
really I can't speak to that. So I don't know. I know what I hear, and I heard a couple years ago that MEV was an existential threat to Ethereum, and that was a long
Yeah.
time ago, and not enough has been done on the matter as far as I'm concerned. One of the things that's got me really riled up about this is if you look at the transaction density in the public mempool, right? So I run a validator at home, and I run vanilla blocks. I don't use MEV. And my last couple of proposals have been like 6 million gas. Like I can't even hit the target because the public mempool is so starved for transactions. People just aren't sending their transactions to the public mempool because they want to use these private relays, these private mempools. They want to use Titan and Beaver Builder to build their blocks. And they're willing to trade off having some MEV extracted from the other things that they think that they're getting out of those pools, like front running protection and things like that. So it is kind of a protection racket that they're running, right? They're like, I'm going to protect you from like the big dangerous sandwiches, but you're still going to get squoze a little bit, and unfortunately, that knock-on effects from that is, there's this economic game theory in play that, there's not enough transactions left in the public mempool. It's a real bummer.
If you have more on that, that would be really interesting.
Sure.
It sounds like almost like this is like gangster, like digital gangster stuff. It's, pay us the fee to protect you.
Yeah, it kind of is. Like it consolidated fast. Like it's a duopoly right now. There's two builders that are like the vast majority of block builders.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a capture concern, frankly, for me.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard problem to solve. That's why I get so jazzed about sealed transaction designs, because if you could solve that, you'd be doing something that hasn't been done in economic history, right? Like you'd keep the transaction facilitators from being able to extract value from the transactions, and that would be remarkable.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like thinking through this of like through like with Gas Killer a little bit. It almost sounds like, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that connection or no?
So I don't know much about AVSs and eigenlayer in particular, and so one of the things that I've wondered, and I actually reached out to someone at eigenlayer to answer this for me, was like, how do you protect your IP? Like, I think I kind of understand from a high level how Gas Killer works, right? Like, you take a transaction, you run it against a particular state off chain, you compute an execution witness that the rest of the chain can verify, and then you just do the S-store operations, right? You just do the modifications to state that result at it, and blammo, you have reduced the amount of gas that somebody does, right? And so I guess like with the AVS, you provide that as a service, right? And then folks can use it. But like, how do you protect, like how do you keep somebody from just forking it and copying it? I mean, maybe you don't, and that's fine. But like if I'm Uniswap and you guys invent Gas Killer, I just steal it from you, right? And pass the savings on to my customers.
Yeah, I mean that is a big question that we're trying to figure out and learn more. I think as far as the specific like Uniswap, it wouldn't really work because the Gas Killer doesn't work well for super high frequency DeFi stuff, because if your transaction is very mevable, then it could it just like fucks up from what I understand from Ron at least, it fucks up the ability to return to give a proper state. So Gas Killer is actually kind of limited to use cases that are not super speculative financial stuff. And so like the things that I think are interesting would be then things related to voting, things related to maybe like higher computation things for like privacy preserving stuff. Rebasing is like sounds like a good use case. For example, just transactions that you need to do repeatedly that aren't financial in and of themselves, or mevable, really.
The privacy is a really good one. That's interesting.
Yeah, like I don't know for sure. I'd have to ask Ron. Will definitely know more than me whether that's a good use case or not. But yeah, so like in my simplistic understanding through hours of talking with Ron at this point, it sounds like something that could be interesting. I mean, that also means that like gaming might be interesting because there's not like mev on gaming stuff as far as I know.
Sure.
So yeah, so then like encrypted mempools then sounds like a potential use case there.
Yeah. Yeah, if you had these opcodes available, then maybe a smart contract based implementation of an encrypted mempool, or even like not a full mempool, but just a marketplace. I don't even know how to phrase it, right? But it would basically be an app that folks used on chain to ensure transaction ordering. Weird. I don't know. It's kind of breaking my brain to think about it, but that's why I think that it's important for us to just get those opcodes in there and then let a larger quantity of smarter people work on the problem. Give them the tools,
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot to think about.
Cool. Well, I'm here. I'm in the Discord. I'm hanging out. If you have additional questions or this spurs anything, or you want to put me in touch with somebody else who might have an opinion on what should go into Fusaka, or just talk about, how Ethereum can be more resistant to capture. I'd love to hear thoughts and opinions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for sharing all this, and good to now have someone who is deep in the EIPs to explain this stuff to us.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank
You got it. See you folks later.
Thank you.
Lovely.
See ya.
Hey.
Hey.
Oh,
Hey, Unai,
Hey,
where
hey.
do you want where do you want the transcript and report? Do you want me to post like summary in the chat like they do the core team meetings, or you want me to send it to you?
Oh, actually, I'm